The black smoke hovered in the air briefly before it began to dissipate in front of everyone in the room. Jagger dropped the arrow onto the ground and pulled two small daggers that formed with magic energy out of the sides of his mask. The first thing to emerge from the smoke was the elf's leather boot that connected to leather guards on her knees. Her right and left hip were exposed and small tattoo-like symbols were glowing on her skin. Attached around her waist was a strap to hold a quiver of arrows beside her. More parts of her stomach and arms were exposed with the same symbols as the ones on her thighs. On her hands were two long gloves that extended up to her elbows, each leaving her fingers exposed, except for her middle finger on each hand. In her right hand was the bow she used to injure the residents of Seva days prior to the ceremony. The bow itself appeared to be made out of the bones of an animal, with white tape wrapped around parts of the bow. Unlike Mavis, this blue elf didn't cover her face. Short white hair covered the left side of her face, with bangs stopping just before her left eye. Her hair was shaved on the right side, exposing her pointed ear, and another symbol on the skin just above her right eye would glow as she walked forward. The only other difference between her and Mavis was the color of her eyes, which were black instead of Mavis's yellow. "That's far enough," said Jagger, who was now ready with his daggers. "Shoot another arrow at me, and I will be forced to act." The blue elf laughed. "I never shot an arrow at you," she said. "It was meant for him." Griswold went from hiding behind Jagger to hiding behind the device Tor was stuck in. "I did nothing wrong to you," Griswold shouted. "Where is he? Where is Mavis?" The blue elf demanded. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?" Jagger let his guard down for a moment, and the blue elf shot another arrow. This one Jagger swatted away with one of his daggers when he wasn't even looking at the blue elf. "I think everyone in this room wants to know." Before the blue elf could reach Jagger, Sandre stood up and revealed a circular blade from under her dress. The upward motion of her swing caught the blue elf by surprise, but she dodged it at the last possible second. Jagger took the opportunity to rush in, but before he could swing at the blue elf, she vanished in the smoke again. When she reappeared, she was behind Griswold, and she pulled him to the ground. She took the tip of one of her arrows and freed Tor with ease from the grasp of the device. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Fine now," replied Tor. Griswold was back on his feet and tried to hit the blue elf with a cheap shot, but Tor grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the wall behind them. And the blue elf readied another arrow and pointed it at Jagger. "Another move and the big man will splatter his brains against the wall." The blue elf looked around the room for the closest exit. "I want answers, and I want them now." "Please," pleaded Triborn, "let him down. The chief is fragile." "Go on and crush his head," said Jagger, much to the horror of the audience. "I could care less about this guy or his community." Eleanor stood in front of Jagger after his comment, and Sandre joined her sister shortly after. "What are you saying?" said Eleanor. "You are our guest." "Did you really think May wanted to escort me here willingly?" Jagger laughed, but you could only tell by hearing him under the mask. "I came here for answers about Mavis. I heard this was the last place he was seen." Eleanor pulled a similar circular blade from under her dress. However, before the twins could attack, a portal opened next to the blue elf and Tor. The entire time, Corey sat strapped to the chair trying to evaluate the situation and find a way for her to escape. As tensions continued to rise in the room, her inability to move was going to prove more and more detrimental to her health. She tried to signal Tor with her eyes, but he was holding Griswold against the wall and had his back to her. Instead, she locked eyes with the blue elf and pulled her arms upward to signal her restraints. Out from the portal that had just opened stepped Raisha, River, and the gargoyle. River spread her arms apart as the magic flowing through the cracks in her mask began to glow even brighter. Shortly after, a wave of water entered the room from in front of her and knocked everyone, including Jagger, to the ground. The wave didn't hit the blue elf or Tor, who were behind the effects of the magic. The water magic did knock Corey to the ground, pushing the chair into another chair, but not hard enough to free her. The wave of water magic took the entire room by surprise and left most of the audience gasping for air afterwards. Jagger got up first and shook some of the water off his hair and mask. "A little warning next time?" "You're fine," said River. "Grab one of the twins." Jagger grabbed Eleanor by her arm and forced her over to the other members of the Welton Company. "Here." "Can you handle the rest of this mess?" asked Raisha, her orange eyes as intimidating as ever. "Yeah, I got this." Jagger handed Eleanor over to Raisha. Raisha opened another portal with a click of the device that they had shown off on the Barra show and pulled Eleanor through the portal with her. "Where are you taking my sister?" Sandre yelled at Raisha as Raisha vanished. "Cooperation would be the best plan of action." Jagger put his arms out to try to calm everyone down. "If not, it's going to get real bloody in here." Tor dropped Griswold and released him. The chief of Seva tried to rush off, but he went from Tor's grasp right into the gargoyles. The gargoyle didn't lift Griswold up. Instead, he just placed one of his large hands on the chief's shoulder, and Griswold figured it best not to move. Sandre, or are you Eleanor? Whatever. Jagger shrugged. Drop your weapon, and we won't do anything to your chief or your people. Jagger looked toward River, whose eyes were locked on the blue elf. Sandre looked at Triborn, then at Griswold, who gave her a nod. Sandre lowered her weapon to the ground, then stood back up. Good girl, said Jagger. We've taken one of the twins, which I heard are precious here in Seva. Jagger turned around to face Griswold. You will tell us the moment you see Mavis in Seva again. I don't care how you get the word to us, you just let us know. Otherwise, we'll be sending whichever twin we took back, one piece at a time. Sandre began to sob as the rest of the people in the audience were cowering against the farthest wall. We will inform the Welton Company if we see Mavis. Just please don't hurt me or my people, begged Griswold. We won't. We're taking her too, though. Jagger pointed at the blue elf. I don't care what you do with the big guy or that girl you tied to the chair. I'm not his to barter, said the blue elf. I came here for Mavis too. You're blue, said River, ironically with the blue glow of her mask. You must know more about Mavis than anyone else. We want answers. The gargoyle released Griswold and walked over to the blue elf. Before he could reach her, Tor stood between them. The two were practically giants, with Tor not being too far off from the same height as the gargoyle. It was the first time the other Welton Company members saw anyone that rivaled the size of the gargoyle. What do we know about this guy? Jagger asked Griswold, as if they were still mingling the way they were earlier. He has some innate magic abilities that he doesn't seem to remember how to use. Other than that, I didn't get a chance to find out because he crashed the party, Griswold replied. Yeah, he's always crashing parties, River added. Let's just take the big guy down and grab the elf. River spread her arms again, but an arrow flew at her and she barely ducked in time to avoid it. The moment the arrow flew, Tor planted a right hand on the gargoyle. The monster of the Welton Company didn't even flinch, and the punch he returned to Tor sent Tor crashing to the ground. With the commotion going on, the blue elf rolled off the stage, where the device was, and slid with one of her arrows in her hand. She used the tip to free Corey in a similar fashion to how she freed Tor and pulled Corey up to her feet. Thanks, said Corey. I know an exit. I'm not leaving without information, replied the elf. You're not leaving, period, if we don't go now. Tor got back to his feet and retreated back to Corey and the blue elf. The blue elf continued to fire arrows to keep the Welton Company at bay, then ran out a back entrance that Corey saw earlier. Now back in another corridor similar to the ones they traversed earlier, they could hear the other Welton Company members trying to get to the door to catch them. Hurry, the blue elf said. What's your name? Corey said as she ran beside her. Call me Saji, replied the blue elf. Her speed was much greater than Corey's, so she got ahead of them, then stopped to turn around. She fired 3 arrows behind Corey and Tor and displaced parts of the ceiling so that it crumbled to buy them more time. At the end of the corridor were another pair of metal doors. Saji stopped next to the doors, and Corey did the same. Tor was struggling to keep up, but not far behind. He barreled through the 2 metal doors to bust them open and get them outside. The sun was so bright that it bothered them after being inside the facility for so long. Corey heard a commotion ahead of them and continued to press on. I hope this area is the lot. We need to find Audra and Cindy. Friends of yours? Asked Saji. I need to find Mavis. I'm a detective. I can help you find him, said Corey, but I need your help to save my friends. Saji took an arrow with a rope attached and shot up to a nearby wall. No, please, help us, Corey shouted. Saji looked out into the parts of Seva in front of her, then down at Corey. I can see your friends from here. We're not far. Keep going straight. I will go ahead.